What's up, fellow YouTubers? Hey, I got another video for you here. This is my modern mono green devotion deck. And before we get started, I want to throw out a special shout out to Kron714. He actually showed me how to, he introduced me to this deck. I played against him with my Infect deck, and he wasted me on turn 4 with everything on the board and no more cards in his library, and I just never heard of anything like that before. And so thank you so much for showing me this deck and helping me build it, and then even taking the time to help me run it and teach me how to ramp up the mana and make some of the decisions that happen in the game. So Kron714, thanks again. All right, in this video we'll start off with a deck tech, and I'll walk through my cards and tell you what I'm playing and how they interact with one another and create win conditions for you. And then I'll actually show you an in-game example of how this deck works and how to make it happen. All right, let's start off with 14 Forests is what I'm running, and then a Kessig Wolf run. And this land is in there because you can throw some mana at it, tap it, and then that adds so many mana that you generated to a single creature. And then that creature gains trample, and you could just run over stuff with that, so it could be extremely powerful. Then I have Nykthos, and this card is really what makes the mana generation work, where you can get like over 100 mana on turn 3 or 4. It's just insane. But for 2 mana, you can tap this and add your current devotion to your mana pool. And so by untapping this and tapping it, untapping and tapping within the same turn, you could just multiply up your mana and do some fun stuff with it. All right, Stomping Ground is just it's a shock land and allows you to, really what it does is it helps you get 1 more red mana in case you have Hammer of Purphoros in your hand and want to cast it. Abundant Growth allows you to add 1 mana of any color when you tap the land that it's attached to. Again, this is only there for Hammer of Purphoros, really, no, it's just for Hammer. If you have that in your hand, it can generate 1 more red mana to get that out on the table. All right, Arbor Elf. This guy really helps out early game. You want to play this turn 1 if you have it. Helps out early game because you can untap a forest that can get you like your 4th mana on turn 3 or something like that to get your Garruk out, or it can add 1 more mana to get you an extra card in your Genesis Wave if you're playing that early game. So, or it can untap a forest that Utopia Sprawl or multiple Utopia Sprawls are attached to really get you to the level of mana to ramp this deck up and really get it going. Utopia Sprawl, you attach this to a target forest, and then every time you tap it, it gives you one mana of the color of your choice, and you select the color that you want. And so if you attach like 3 of these to a single forest, and then you tap that forest, you're tapping that 1 forest for 4. And so that really helps out once you get your mana going. The nice thing is if you attach 1 of these to a single forest can pay the 2 mana to tap your Nykthos. That's really what you're trying to do. All right, Voyaging Satyr. This is a 2 mana cost card for a 1/2 creature, but why I have these in here is that when you tap this card, you can untap a target land, and the target you're looking to hit with this is Nykthos. So if you have 2 or 3 of these out there, you can tap Voyaging Satyr, untap Nykthos. And as long as you have, you'll have mana in your mana pool, then all you do is tap your next Voyaging Satyr, untap your Nykthos, tap it again. And so you can tap your Nykthos with this 1 card after you've Genesis waved them all in 3 times right there in that single turn. So that card is really sweet for getting your mana up to like over 100 on turn 4. It's just great for that. All right, Strangleroot, guys. This guy comes in with haste and has 2 devotion. So don't need to say anything else more there. Also, he has Undying, so if he does get wrecked, he comes back with a 1/1 counter on him, I think, which just makes him that much better. That's cool. All right, Burning Tree Emissary. This is good for early game if you can get it out because it adds a red and green mana to your mana pool and lets you start off with additional mana early in the game. And then it's also good for later in the game because later in the game, I mean turn 4. It gives you that 2 mana that lets you tap Nykthos if you've consumed all of your other mana to even get Burning Tree on the board or something. All right, Hammer of Purphoros. I really don't want to see this in my hand ever. I only want to play this through Genesis Wave. I don't have to mess with the red cost, and it just gets put out on the battlefield, and all my creatures gain haste. And so if I'm waving in like 10 creatures, if they come in with Summoning Sickness, this card says, nope, you get to attack with it this turn, and that's how you get to run over your opponent by instantly attacking the moment they wave in. Eternal Witness. This card is great. It has the 2 devotion that helps, but really why you play this card is for its effect. When it enters the battlefield, you take a target card, so that's basically anything in your graveyard, and put it in your hand ready to play it. And so you're usually looking for Garruk so that you can cast it again that turn and replace the Garruk that you've already +1, or you're looking for Genesis Wave so that you could wave in another group of monsters. You could be looking for Nykthos if a Nykthos ended up there, because you could replace your Nykthos and tap it to add your devotion again and boost things up. And so this card really comes in handy. Leatherback Bailiff. This card isn't too important to this deck. I mean, for 3 costs, it's 4/5. That's pretty good in and of itself. You could get this out on turn 2 if you have an Arbor Elf. But it's really there for devotion. 3 devotion on a single card is terrific when you're tapping Nykthos. Predator Ooze is about the same. It's 3 devotion out on the table. I guess if your game goes longer and you're able to attack with this guy for a few rounds, he could build up some damage there, but you're really playing it for the devotion, I think. Garruk, this guy is killer and works well with Nykthos in order to ramp up your mana. You could have him out on turn 3, +1 him. You untap 2 target lands, one of them being Nykthos, hopefully the other one being a forest that has a Utopia Sprawl attached to it, so you could generate the mana to tap Nykthos again. And so, and then also he has his ultimate or -4 ability, which is creatures you control get +3/+3, and I think they also get trample. And so that's definitely a win condition right there. Wolfbriar Elemental. I was running 4 of these, and they were pretty much my win condition. And it's really cool when you can cast it from your hand. So if you get one of these in your hand, either in the beginning or off of a draw, then that's the best way to cast it, because you can use the multi-kicker, and so you could just ramp up a ton of mana, and then after you pay the cost of the card, everything else is a 2/2 green wolf creature. So you can end up with 50 2/2 green wolf creatures on the battlefield, and it's pretty much game over. When this card gets cast from Wave, then you don't get to kick it. It just becomes a 4/4 creature on the table with 2 devotion. Still not bad, but I want to be able to cast this from my hand. Primal Command. This card is it's actually really sweet. When I first saw it, I'm like, what's the big deal? But it's totally saved my game multiple times. Giving yourself 7 life can maybe get you to the next turn, which is when you're gonna draw that next land or whatever, and you're just gonna go crazy with Genesis Wave. But then what it also lets you do is it lets you limit their lands a little bit, so you can put one of their lands onto their library, and it removes their ability to manage mana, and then you can kind of loop this with Eternal Witness, and bring the Primal Command back into your hand and play it again next turn and keep your opponent short a land. It's Primal Command, Eternal Witness looping. But this card, it just has a lot of options, and it just lets you choose whatever your situation is, how to handle it. Primeval Titan. Most decks run more than one, but I'm just running one of these, and it gives you 2 devotion. It's a 6/6, which is pretty sweet if you can get them. If you can play him with trample and add him to your attacker. Playing with haste and add him to your attackers. He's got trample, but then also when you put him into play or when he attacks, you can pick up 2 land cards from your library and put them into the battlefield tapped. So if you don't have a Nykthos on the board, well, now you do. And you just have to be able to use a Voyaging Satyr or a Garruk to untap it, and then there you go. There's your devotion. So he can really help out in a pinch and kind of like tutor up a Nykthos. That's why he's in here. Craterhoof. This guy is definitely a game winner. Homeboy's expensive in MTGO and pretty affordable in paper, but you only need one of them. And so this guy, he has haste when he comes in, and he adds +X+X, where X is the number of creatures you control, to all creatures, and other creatures get trample. And so this guy is he really is a beast. I mean, he just comes in and just ramps everything up through the roof, and everyone's all in attacking, and it's game over when this guy hits the board. And you want to wave him in. That's how you want to cast him. But if he's in your hand and you can ramp up mana, that works too. Genesis Hydra, I've got him in here because he lets me grab a card from my library, a creature, and put it into play. But this guy's just fun to cast because if you've already, if you don't have access to a Genesis Wave or you don't have access to a Craterhoof, you could just, and you have a bunch of mana ramped up, you could just add all that mana to this guy, and that's what he comes out with in regards to his attack power and toughness. And so I've casted this guy with over 100 on him, and that is just impressive. And then finally, Genesis Wave is the card that really makes this deck what it is and allows you to get all your mana and put it into moving cards directly from your library to your graveyard. And so however many you pay for X is how many cards you get to pick up from your library, and then anything within that mana cost goes directly on the board without paying the mana cost for each individual card. So insane. So hopefully that review gives you a good idea about what this deck is trying to do, and let's move on to our play example so you can see this thing in action. All right, here we go. I lost the roll, but here's my hand. It's looking pretty good. I've got 2 forests, and I've got a Garruk. I've got a Genesis Wave. I'm looking pretty good. I have a 2-drop there. Something to do on turn 1. Here's my Arbor Elf that I just drew. That was sweet. It's perfect timing for him. So he's out on the battlefield. And so what's going to happen is I'm going to play my next forest, and then I have the ability to untap it with my Arbor Elf. If I need to generate more mana, I'm putting my Strangleroot Geist out, and I'm swinging in for 3. Might as well, since I don't have anything else to do that turn, and untapping another forest didn't really do anything for me. All right, here comes my Voyaging Satyr. This is going to allow me to untap my Nykthos once it comes into play. Here's my Arbor Elf, giving me additional mana to get my Abundant Growth out and attaching it to a forest. And on my draw, here is Nykthos. So that is really cool. So I'm getting exactly where I want to be in regards to having forest, my Nykthos, Arbor Elf, a Voyaging Satyr. This is looking pretty good. Here's another another forest that and allows me to generate enough mana to get Garruk out on the board. And here I untap. I use Garruk to untap both of those lands. Here's my devotion for I'm casting Genesis Wave now for what was it, 11? Yep. And that's not bad. I mean, that's going to give me 11 cards right here. And here we go. I have another Nykthos to replace my Nykthos on the board, which gives me an untapped Nykthos that I could tap again this turn, and another Garruk. A couple Wolfbriar Elementals. I'd like to play those from my hand, but hey, I'll take it and put it on the board. Eternal Witness will let me pull something from my graveyard, which now I have some cards in my graveyard to select from. And look at the board state, it's definitely getting there. Triggering the ability, and I'm selecting Garruk so that I could +1 the Garruk on the board that already got replaced, and then I can make sure I have enough mana to cast Garruk and +1 him again this turn. And so there I just +1 Garruk, generating some mana. Kind of a pain to click this button every time. Not so bad with like 19 mana, but when you'll see later I have to click it over 100 times. There should just be a button to apply all. Here's my Genesis Wave for 19. So now I have access to the rest of my deck pretty much. And I've got a hammer, I have another Garruk, I've got Utopia Sprawls, which I'll be able to immediately attach as soon as they come into play. Burning Tree Emissary adds a little bit more mana to what I'm doing. There's my Craterhoof, he's going to come into play. My Voyaging Satyr is going to allow me to tap it to untap my Nykthos again. I mean, this is just everything you want to see. Primal Command it is great to be out there, but it's going to end up in my graveyard. But really, I don't really need that card right now. I mean, things are just happening the way that I need them to. Here's my Nykthos is untapped. I just tapped it. Use my Voyaging Satyr to untap and tap it again. Here I'm using my Forest to tap for 4 each time. Here I am at generating. I'm at 120 mana on turn 4. And I'm just going to spend this mana to get Genesis Hydra out. I'm not going to make you watch me tap this button 100 more times. Let's just cut to the chase. Here we go. And I'm just about done. Yeah, that took like 2 minutes to tap. I'm just about done here. I'm going to pay 118 to cast Genesis Hydra. And I'm going to select Primeval Titan. And the really cool thing about this is that at this point, when I add everything up and Genesis Hydra comes into play, I will be swinging all in because my creatures have haste due to the Hammer of Purphoros, and they also get boosted up from Craterhoof, and then Genesis Hydra's coming in. I'm going to be all in attacking for 293 damage on turn 4. So while that doesn't really matter because all I need to do is 20 damage, it just shows how crazy and insane this deck gets. And it was just wild to see on turn 4. I mean, I got everything on the battlefield I wanted out there and was able to generate crazy amounts of mana and just using Wave to just bring everything in. I found my hammer, multiple Garruks, multiple Nykthos. Those Voyaging Satyrs really help boost things up. It's just so much fun. I mean, the number of working parts and their synergy in this deck is so cool. The direction that you can take it. If you find a limitation in one area, you can use a different approach to make something happen, whether it's with mana generation or it's with getting more creatures on the battlefield or boosting them or getting getting haste or putting trample out there. I mean, so many different ways to make this deck work and to deal with this with the cards that you end up in hand. And so I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a lot of fun. This is a great example of what this deck can do, and I'll continue to learn how to run it and enjoy.